Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the very warm welcome. I thought when I was coming up to Maine it would be a little bit cooler than this, but I brought the weather with me. We were in Chicago earlier this week. We brought it in from Chicago. Bill, I really appreciate you sort of going off script there because you gave me all the license in the world. So. I do want to talk about sort of lending for a greater good, and I'm going to try and do it in the way that I do it, which is never too directly. And I want to start. Let me just first ask, how many? Just so I have a sense of this, how many of you here are? First, let me just see the staff of Genesis. Small staff doing remarkable things, right? Let me see board members. How many board members? Okay, thank you. Investors. Nice mix of investors and borrowers. We love the borrowers. And yeah, former board member. And friends, right? And there are other folks here who are friends and partners, and that's great. And I love coming to, my job, we are a national organization. We work with several hundred CDFIs, none better than Genesis. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron Phillips. It's good as postal. And so I have this great honor and great pleasure of going around the country and getting to see this kind of celebration, and it's always inspiring. I actually want to tell a story that captures for me something really important that's going on right here in this room. And as I said, it's not very direct. So this is a story about the president of Yeshiva University in New York City. And Yeshiva, some of you may know, is a Jewish university. It's a good university, but it's known for some things and not for others. And the president of Yeshiva some years ago was incredibly frustrated that he didn't feel like his school got the credit nationally and internationally that it deserved. He thought we had great academics, we turn out great students, great people, and we deserve more credit. And so he went about a process of discovery to figure out what it was that Yeshiva was missing. What did they not have that all these other great schools have? What did Harvard have and Yale have? And what did Bowdoin have? What did Stanford have? What did the great international schools have? And after a lot of study, we worked with his faculty, he worked with his board, he had brought in, one of the big consulting firms to figure it out. But they realized that the one thing that Yeshiva University did not have, that all these other schools had, was a crew team. So he decided, in Manhattan, that he was going to have a crew team. And so he went out and he bought a boat, and he convinced one of his professors to be the coach of the crew team. He knew nothing about the crew, and he recruited some students who knew nothing about rowing. And they went out. The first time they went out, they sang. and then they started entering races, and it took several races before they finished. The first race they ran ashore, the next race they finished. Finally, when they finished the race, it was an hour behind everybody else, and it wasn't a very long race. And so this was not going so well. So he said, all right, well, we have a crew team, but that's not it. What are we going to do? And so he sent out his assistant to find out what it was that they weren't doing, what was wrong with the Yeshiva crew team. And he said, I want you to go to University of Stanford and Harvard and Yale, go to Bowdoin and go to Cambridge and Oxford, visit all these great schools with great crew teams and come back and tell me what it is we need to do. What it is that they're doing that we're not doing. So he goes, the assistant goes and visits all these schools, and it's a week and it's 2 weeks, and the president's pacing in his office, and finally his assistant walks in and he says, well, what is it? Have you found out the answer? And he says, yes, I found the answer. You'll be amazed. He says, well, tell me. He says, it's so simple, you just won't believe it. And he says, well, you've got to tell me. I've been waiting. I need to know the answer to this. What is it that all these other schools do? What is it that they're doing right that we're not doing right? And he said, and his assistant said, at all those other schools, they have only one person yelling and 8 people yelling. So there's a movement going on in this country that's really about figuring out how to support lending for a greater good, and it's important. And one of the things that's come out of our work with Starbucks, which is our main partner in the Create Jobs initiative, along with a couple other companies you've heard of like Google and Banana Republic and Citibank. And there are more coming. But one of the things we've really come out of that with is it's changed how we in the CDFI world think of ourselves, because we're very proud of what we do. We work very hard at it. We always have a hard time explaining. We can't pass until this came along. We couldn't pass the mom test, which is we ask ourselves, can we explain to our mothers what we do? I never did. 20 years, I never did. But one of the things that really came out of this was in Create Jobs for USA, CDFIs suddenly stopped being these sort of quirky, interesting little financial institutions that are lending for the greater good, and they became the solution. They became a solution to a really very real problem in this country, which is we had a situation where there wasn't enough lending. Small businesses were having a very difficult time. Some of us just came from a meeting in Chicago with the SBA, and the SBA says that really small dollar loans. And when we think about job creation, we don't think about just retail businesses. We think about affordable housing. That's a significant job producer, which is really important to recognize. And nonprofits are important job producers. And small dollar loans just are not getting made in this country. The SBA, the statistics are sort of stunning. And so, we can be a solution, not the only solution, but a solution to that particular problem. But what's happened alongside of that is that CDFIs, community development financial institutions, have started being seen as solutions in a lot of different ways. And so, when we look at policy, we have a slightly messed up political system in this, or political operation in this country right now. And so politics and policy isn't being made very well. And so what's happening as we're going into this period of austerity, which is causing a lot of pain for a lot of communities, people are looking for bang for the buck, and they're looking for solutions that will take a little bit of money and make a big impact. And CDFIs happen to do that. And because of great work by you and by others in the CDFI industry, a lot of people know that. And so it's not just the Small Business Administration that's coming to us now saying, we want CDFIs to be sort of the delivery system for the solution that we need to deliver to this country. It's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it's the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, and other agencies. And so one of the biggest challenges we have in our industry right now is making smart choices about which opportunities are the right opportunities. But the point there is really that in the policy arena, at the federal level, we're seen as solutions. We bring something to the table that no one else does. At the state and local level, without going into all that, Maine, I don't know Maine particularly, but we talk about the fiscal cliff that the federal government is facing at the end of this year, which should scare all of us. But the fiscal cliffs that states and particularly municipalities are facing are actually going to be more devastating, and they will be more devastating because there's no getting out of them. And so they're enormously important. And so what we're seeing all over this country is states and municipalities trying to figure out how to use their resources in ways they never did before to work with CDFIs. And so it's happening at that level. It's happening with banks all over this country who understand that CDFIs can lend effectively in distressed communities or underserved communities, and they can get paid back, and that they can recycle that money in ways that the banks can. And part of that is because of what's happened to the banks through the credit crunch and the recession, but it's also because they have regulators looking at them, and it makes it harder for them. And we are great partners for them, and so they see us as solutions. And so, that is sort of the state of the CDFI world right now. Is that we have our challenges. We still need to, CDFIs are profitable but not profit maximizing. And the key to that is we do, as the Genesis Fund does, we do a lot of technical assistance. We work with our borrowers, we stay with them, and that's really the key to what we're able to do. But we're being asked to do more. And as someone once said, if you lose $1 a widget, you can't make it up on volume, right? And so we have growth challenges, and we have a lot of challenges that we're facing. But we know now that after 20 years, and for the industry, 30 and 35 years of trying to do this business, we know that we can meet those challenges. We know that we can find solutions. And so at the federal level, we're looking at a whole range of things that we think will benefit the industry and benefit Genesis Fund. I'm gonna now shift a little. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna sort of pick up that story I told before in a different way. But for this story, I need you, and this is really about lending for greater good. For this story, I need you to travel with me a little bit, and to travel kind of far, because I need you to go back with me to the city of Jerusalem in the time of King Solomon. We all know King Solomon, right? Solomon the Wise. Make sure we know what we're talking about here. And Dave, not like this at all. One cold winter morning in Jerusalem, bread shop in Jerusalem. People came from all over to line up to buy the bread at this particular shop. And in fact, people liked it so much that people would come up just to smell the aroma of the bread and baking in the bakery. And that's what this woman was doing. She didn't have enough money to buy the bread. So she was just standing there. But the baker didn't like that. He didn't like it. He wasn't a very nice guy. And he didn't like it that people would come and smell his bread. He wanted them to pay to smell his bread. And so he came out. He couldn't take it any longer. He came out and he yelled at the woman who was just standing there with her eyes closed enjoying the smell. And he said, "You there! What are you doing?" She said, I'm just smelling the bread. It's so wonderful. It's the best smell in all of Jerusalem. He said, "I know, I baked the bread." He said, "But if you're going to smell my bread, you have to pay me to smell my bread." And And she said, but I'm a beggar. I have no money. I can't pay you. I can't afford it. I have no money to pay you. And he says, doesn't matter. You got to pay me or you got to leave. And by this point, he's making noise, and people start gathering around just like they would now. And they start gathering around, and he's yelling at her, and she's just trying to, not get into trouble. And finally, some people say, Baker, they're laughing at him. But they say, Baker, if you have such a good case, you should take it to the court of King Solomon, because that's what you did then when we had a disagreement. You took it to the court of King Solomon. And so he said, I'll do that. And he takes the woman by the arm, and he makes her go to the court of King Solomon. And all the people follow, because this is crazy. This is ridiculous. What's going on here? And they get into the court, and the people have heard about this now. The word's gotten advanced. Everybody's excited in the court. And Solomon says, so wait, who's the baker? The baker says, I am. He says, what's the problem, baker? He says, this woman has been smelling my bread that I bake. It's the best bread in all of Jerusalem. She's been smelling it, and if she's going to smell my bread, she has to pay me for the smell of my bread. And everybody laughs in the court, of course, because it seems ridiculous. And Solomon sternly turns and looks at the woman and says, is it true that you've been smelling this man's bread? And she said, yes, but I wasn't hurting anybody, and I was only smelling it. Do I have to pay? And Solomon says, by the law of the land, you must pay the man for the smell of his bread. And now the court is really silent. People are amazed by what's going on. And she says, but I don't have any money. And he says, how much money do you have? And she says, I'm poor. I have very little money. I just have a little bit of money. And she shakes it. And he says, count. And she counts it 1 point at a time. And she says, it's just a few shekels. It's really not very much money. He pauses and looks at her for a while. Then he turns to the baker. He says, Baker, you've been paid. The baker says, I haven't been paid. She has to give me the money. I'll take that money. He says, Solomon says, no, don't you understand? The sound of the coins is payment. And that story is about lending for a greater good, because the smell of the bread is that greater good. There's something that happens in every transaction that the Genesis Fund does that you can't capture. It doesn't show up on a balance sheet. It doesn't show up on a profit and loss statement. You can't capture it in an annual report. You can't even capture it really in a room like this as you talk to each other. It's something special, and that thing that it is the smell of the bread. There's a really wise financial writer named James Grant. And he's a really interesting financial writer. I don't know if anybody here knows him. He is the most conservative thinker about financial issues. He thinks that the creation of the Federal Reserve, this is true, he thinks the creation of the Federal Reserve was the beginning of socialism in the United States. Right? And he's very conservative, but he says something really important, which is he says in the introduction, this tells you something about me, the introduction of a book that's a history of credit in the United States, and I read it while I was on vacation, so find out about it. But what he says is that credit is a financial product with a moral lineage. And what he means by that is that when you extend credit to someone, or to a business, or to a community, or a nonprofit, what you're really doing is you're demonstrating your faith in the future. And that person, or that community, or that business's ability to thrive and to do well in the future. And so what's really happening at the Genesis Fund is this ability to see a future and to see opportunity and to see a greater good when other people don't. And that's what it's about. And so I'm here just to congratulate you. I'm here to say thank you for the good work that you do in Maine and it ripples across this country. I thank you, Bill, for all your leadership and your great work. And I just ask you to take with you, as you think about the next 20 years, to take with you the